sympathy. We have to take away our pain and breathe. Hey, you just come along, just come along, just come along. I waited, way too long, way too long, way too long. Hey, you just come along, just come along, just come along. Life is more fun if you come over. My head is beginning to despair. My hands are struggling, that's not fair. Oh no, that's not fair. Are you ready for the race? I don't want to lose again. Are you ready for the race? We should always be the first. Feel the blood in your veins. We're standing at a landing place. Feel the blood in your veins. Say hello to the inner space. There are so many ways to build ourselves again. There are so many ways, but we have to break our chains. Come on, look at me. I have some sympathy. We have to take away our pain and breathe. Hey, you just come along, just come along, just come along. I waited way too long, way too long, way too long. Hey, you just come along, just come along, just come along. Life is more fun if you come over. The view from here is clear and bright, but all the memories all my life if I could. Out here in Hollywood.
everyone. Thank you all for joining us, and we will get to it during our Q&A. I'm Paige Dillamuth on the membership team here at SoFi. If this is your first SoFi event, we're so glad to have you, and we want to welcome you to the SoFi community, and we hope that after tonight, you continue to keep going to our SoFi member experiences. Tonight, we're going to talk about financial planning for couples. This is a topic often avoided by many couples. It's sometimes considered a little bit taboo or might have even led to a few fights here and there. But tonight, we have two of SoFi's certified financial planners here, and they're going to help set you up for financial success with your partner. So please join me in welcoming both of our guest speakers. We have Brian Walsh. He is a SoFi CFP and Manager of Financial Planning, and Hanae Strickland, who is on our membership marketing team as a marketing lead, and also CFP and recent newlywed. Give them a round of applause.
Thank you all. Very nice to meet you. Looking forward to our awesome discussion this evening. Thanks for coming out on a rainy Tuesday in San Francisco. We're super excited to jump in. Before we do, Paige mentioned, my name's Hanae Strickland. I'm a marketing lead on the membership team at SoFi. I'm a certified financial planner, CFP. And also a little bit about me personally. I have been with my partner for 10 years. We met in college, and we just recently got married last year. So my husband and I live in Pacific Heights in San Francisco. We're going through the process of merging our finances. Although I am a CFP and know a lot about this, it's super painful. And so I'm excited to share my story. Hopefully we can learn from each other because I need some tips from you guys.
And I'm Brian Walsh. I am the manager of financial planning here at SoFi. And I'm also a CFP. Been with my wife for 14 years now, married for 8. So we have gone through the ups and downs of merging finances, and we learned some things the hard way, and hope to share some tips that'll help everyone out here.
So before we jump in, would love to do a little icebreaker and get to know each other. So with a show of hands, and there's no right or wrong answer, this is a yes or no questions, but how many of you have open conversation about money with your partner? Okay, all right, pretty good showing of hands. All right, and so next question, how many of you know how much your partner makes? All right, pretty open group.
Okay, how many of you think that you need to pay off your student loans before you start having kids? Okay, again, no right or wrong answers. And then this will be a fun one. How many of you know someone who's had a relationship end because of money issues?
Ooh.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, that definitely happened, but we will set you up with the tools that you need to have those conversations to really be transparent with each other so you can get ahead of it. Before we jump in, yes, make our legal team very happy, compliance team very happy by showing you this slide. Brian and I are CFPs, and we're happy to answer your questions. We can answer them at a very high level. Obviously, we don't know the ins and outs of each of your very individual personal situations. We encourage you all to talk with a certified financial planner or a planner at SoFi. We will send you the link to do so. This is completely free. You can set up a call with a planner and tell them about your situation to get very personalized advice. Also, Brian and I will be available after this presentation to talk to you. And our planner on our team, Allie, is also here to talk to you as well. Cool, so let's jump right in. We have a lot to talk about. We're gonna save questions for the end. So please, if you have questions and if you are tuned in live, please comment in the comments and we will get to them at the end of the presentation. So we're gonna be talking about 3 major topics here. First, we're gonna talk about communication and improving it so you can prevent arguments. We'll get into sharing your goals together, your values, and any concerns you have about money. And then we'll talk about the tactical establishing roles in your relationship when managing money and really developing a plan. And so most of you, and thank you for writing in with the questions you want to talk about, most of you wanted to know, how do I actually do this thing? How do I set up the accounts? How do I work through all of this with my partner? And that's really important, and we'll get to that. But that's kind of the easy part, to be honest. What's really challenging is understanding your relationship with money and your partner's relationship with money and how you're gonna approach it together, because once you have that, you'll be in a great place to set up a strong plan together. So let's talk about communication. We recently did a SoFi study with our members, and we asked them, what would you rather? Would you rather tell your partner about a pre-existing STD, or would you rather tell them about your very large debt? Almost 40% of members told us that they would rather tell their partner about an STD. So clearly, talking about debt, talking about money is very challenging, and we hope to give you the tools today to help you do that. But not talking about money can also lead to financial infidelity. In the same survey, we learned that 1 out of 10 members have a secret account. 4 out of 10 members admitted to lying about the cost of a purchase. And we learned that 3 out of 10 members mentioned they would rather be cheated on than have their credit score lowered. Wow, I know, I heard something in the crowd. Wow. So clearly, money is a tough topic. Many of us try to hide certain aspects of our financial situation from our close friends and family. It doesn't have to be your partner. But let's have some fun. I'm gonna put Brian on the spot here and ask you about the last time you committed financial infidelity.
I do love that she said, when's the last time, not if you committed financial infidelity.
We all do it.
But in all honesty, I think, everyone thinks of financial infidelity like some bad thing, an ill-intended thing. But what happened was a couple weeks ago, my wife got the mail before I did, and we've been traveling a bunch, and she got a credit card in the mail. And she was like, oh, Brian, tell me about this secret account that you have now, because I didn't discuss it with her. Now, I had great reward points to go to my kids' 529 plan, so I thought it was great. I just didn't take her feelings into consideration, and then it kept her out of the loop, and she thought I was keeping other things from her if I surprised her with this. So this can be completely on the up and up, and just not telling your significant other about it creates trouble.
Thank you for sharing that story and letting me put you on the spot. So we're going to talk about different types of money arguments, very common types, and some strategies on how to combat them or how to avoid them completely. The first one, Paige actually mentioned this in her intro, that money can be taboo. When things are taboo, we don't talk about them, we just avoid them completely. And so the best practice here is start having the conversations. And I'll share a personal story about that. So 10 years ago, I met my husband in college, and when we first started dating, we were like, okay, 50-50, we'll split our expenses. That seems fair. And so kind of going with that pattern throughout our careers, even when one of us was making more than the other, and we just kind of put 50-50 into every expense, and that's how we went about things. Fast forward, 9 years later, we're about to get married. And I realized we haven't really talked about money because we use this kind of 50-50 mechanism to kind of avoid the conversation. And so I went to my husband and I said, all right, we're gonna get married in a month. We should probably talk about our money and maybe show each other what we have. So we scheduled a date and we sat down, we pulled up all of our accounts, and we did this kind of very dramatic financial reveal where we showed each other, kind of our balance sheets. And it was the first time, it was super awkward and really nerve-wracking, honestly. But it was the first time we really had that really open conversation and put everything on the table. And I can tell you it really improved our relationship. And it was a great way to go into marriage. Our conversations have gotten much better since then. But yours doesn't have to be so dramatic. But really finding what works for you by just starting the conversation is the key here. Next thing. So money arguments tend to be more intense. They linger and they can repeat. So the best way to combat this is to set up money dates. I mentioned that my husband and I set up a time to actually talk about money. It might seem kind of weird, but if you set up a regular cadence of times you get together, the agenda is literally, let's talk money, let's get on the same page, and you can set up a system that works for you. For my husband and I, it's once a quarter. We started out kind of once a year, but I think once a quarter might work better for us. Maybe we'll move it to monthly, but it also can change over time. Money is stressful, and we know that stress reduces the quality of communication. So think about this. If you're stressed at work, you're coming up on a big deadline, or something happens with your car, you have car troubles, you probably don't want to send a nasty email. Or if you do write a nasty email, you step away and take a deep breath before you have that conversation. The same logic goes with talking about money. Be honest with your partner. Be transparent. Tell them you're stressed, because chances are they're stressed too, and maybe set up a time where you both can have a little more level-headedness and not be so stressed about having the conversation. And finally, how individuals view money goes all the way back to your childhood. So every interaction you've ever had with money, and think way back. I mean, this is a really cool conversation you can have with your partner. Ask them, what was your first memory with money? And they might have to think for a little bit because it's not really a common question. But really, even from that moment, it shapes your money map and how you relate with money and how you manage money. And so Brian's actually going to dive into this, really your money personalities. But understanding where each other is coming from is really key to getting to the root of the challenges that we all have with money.
Yeah, so I think when we start talking about money and money values and things along those lines, we have these conversations with members on a day in and day out basis. And I get to kind of observe and understand a bunch of that leading the team. And when we talk to people, it's not like they enjoy having money just for money's sake. Typically, it's whatever comes with it. It's the values behind it. They want it for security or safety. They want to go on adventures. They want to do all sorts of things with the money. And as Hane mentioned, ultimately this comes from decades in the making. So what we've done is we've done some research on this to better understand individuals' money personalities. So if you think about it, someone's money personalities are a combination of their values, their experiences, their culture, their families, just like your normal personality is. And we leveraged some research, if you go to the next slide, on the common types of money personalities. Dr. Klontz out of Kansas State University did some great research on this and found there's 4 common money personalities. There's money worship, money avoidance, money vigilance, and money status. And really, we look at these money personalities as a way to understand the way we think about things so we can properly adjust to it. And that's part of in a relationship is understanding your money personality and then your significant other's money personality as well. Now, when you look at these 4 kind of titles, they look negative. And a lot of times you may think, okay, this is kind of a judgmental type exercise, maybe embarrassed. But to be honest with you, it's applied to my own life. So I grew up in a situation where money was not talked about. And when it was talked about, it was really kind of negative. Didn't really realize how that impacted me until eventually I graduated college. I'm in financial planning. And ultimately, I found that I did not really go about trying to figure out money. I avoided looking at my accounts for months at a time. I had money to pay my bills, but I just simply ignored it, assuming that if I avoided it, that it would go away. So I was really kind of the money avoider personality type, which is, I guess, a little ironic being a CFP and talking about money day in and day out, but that was just my personality and my makeup. So ultimately what I realized I had to do is after some difficult conversations with my wife, we automated everything. Auto bill pay, auto saving, auto budgeting with spending alerts, and ultimately she took over the day-to-day management of our finances, and I just figured out the long-term stuff and the strategic stuff that we need to do. Now that seems kind of funny, a CFP handing over the day-to-day management to my wife who doesn't have a financial background, but that was just the best way to accommodate my money personality to make sure we were going to hit our goals. So we can dive into each of the money personalities in a similar manner. So money worship. When you think about money worship, honestly, this is probably the most common one in this room. It's the most common money personality type across America. It's the idea that having more money is going to lead to better things. And then ultimately you get more money, and then you want to get more money to accomplish and lead to better things. So it's kind of like the goalposts constantly shifting. So when we think about this, if you're looking at yourself like, hey, I can never have enough money. Well, there's some things you can do to really accommodate this. Take and control your budget. And then quite frankly, typically what comes along with this money personality type is having credit card debt. So attacking that credit card debt, getting rid of it, and then keeping it off the books. So that's the way to accommodate for the money worship personality type.
This is me.
We actually found this out preparing for the presentation.
Yeah, we did. I think I see myself in all of these, but definitely you have a stronger personality, and mine is definitely the money worship.
Nice. And then, so the second one, money avoider, we talked about that. This is basically ignoring bank statements, ignoring going online, ignoring the conversation about money because you have a negative relationship with it. And this is where you need to automate, automate, automate. To be honest with you, where technology is now compared to 8 years ago when I went through this with my wife for the first time, totally different story. You can automate damn near anything and to set your financial picture on track. So definitely want to automate as much as possible Stick to a budget, and if you're lucky like me, you have a complementary, I guess, personality with your significant other, and they can balance, your personality out. Third one would be money vigilance. So money vigilance is, when we think of the typical saver mentality, these people don't want to talk about money. They're frugal. They tend to be secretive. They save a lot. They're very safe. So those are all great things when you think about it from a long-term planning and a saving perspective. The downside here is they don't want to talk about money. They don't want to open up. So if they're in a relationship with someone else, it's going to be a lot harder for them to open up. So it's understanding that, understanding where each partner comes into play, and realizing that you need to open up a little bit if this is your personality type, so that way you can improve the trust and overall just improve the communication. And last but not least, we have money status. This is the personality type that connects self-worth to net worth, or earnings, or material possessions. So this is another common one. There's nothing wrong with any of these money personalities, but these are the people who are always after the bigger and the better thing. With this personality, it's focusing on a budget, sticking to that budget, planning ahead. If you fit in this personality group, it also leads to a tendency of compulsive buying. So one thing to do is, if you're on Amazon, leave it in your shopping cart for like 2 or 3 days before you click the buy button. It is so hard.
It's so hard.
I know, the sales are gone. They got the one-click buying. I mean, they kind of know what they're doing at Amazon, I think. So it's simple things like that. Just wait. If you know that that's your inclination, just put a little barrier in place so you could work around it. And just understanding on both sides what they want to accomplish. And it's having those types of conversations to figure out, hey, here's what we want to tackle, and here's ultimately what we're shooting for. And since we didn't want to share any confidential information with members that we talked to, I guess I was the guinea pig for all of the embarrassing situations.
Yeah, we'll put you on the spot.
So I took a look back a few years ago, and on the left would be what my goals were, if you asked me. On the right would be my wife. So my first goal was to finish getting out of credit card debt. Second thing I wanted to accomplish was I wanted to travel. I wanted to live the dream before we had kids. I basically wanted to get it all out and then have kids, and then I could settle down to a boring life. At least that's what I thought in my mind. Not saying it's good or bad. My wife, on the other hand, same first goal. We're on the same page, get rid of that credit card debt. But she wanted to focus on building up that cushion so she could change careers if she wanted to. And then ultimately set aside money for early retirement and have flexibility to not be tied to work and enjoy, life as a family. So as you can see, those are some pretty different goals that we wanted to accomplish. Ultimately, what we had to do is just have a conversation. Sounds simple, right? You just have a conversation. My goals are this, your goals are this. I think it didn't work until we took the step further to find out what was behind the goals. And really the root of the disconnect here was our viewpoint on having kids. I prioritized, let's get everything out of the way before we have kids, and then our lives can slow down and we can just do whatever. She prioritized financial freedom and flexibility because she didn't know if she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom or not. So when we both looked at it from kind of each other's perspectives, we're able to meet in the middle, and we did a little bit of traveling. We lived that vacay life, and if my wife's watching, that was the hashtag she created to keep me happy. I don't know if it caught on. But we did that while balancing for the change of careers, and ultimately she decided to stay at home with our son after he was like a year old. So it was meeting in the middle once we found out the reason behind it. So that's the really important part as we're talking about goals. Okay, so now we're going to get to the nitty-gritty kind of tactical stuff. So we talked about the strategic stuff, talked about building that foundation of communication, getting on the same page with values, personalities, all that stuff's important. But now let's talk about how you actually accomplish that. And the most common question we get when we're talking with couples about financial planning is, how do we figure out who does what, how we set up our accounts, what is the right way to do it? And everyone's looking for a one-size-fits-all approach. And the simple fact is, there is not a one-size-fits-all approach. This is going to depend on every single relationship. The key is to deliberately decide what makes sense for you and your significant other. So there's 3 common approaches that people leverage. There's the completely separate, there's the contributed, which is in the middle, and then there's the completely combined. So the completely separate is, I guess, just like it sounds. You have your separate accounts here, your significant other has the separate accounts there, income goes into each bucket, expenses come out of each bucket. There's basically, they're living on an island, they're not with each other. Again, that could work for people depending on their relationship. The contributed, which is in the middle, is where you start to see some overlap. You start to see some combining. Yes, there's personal accounts, there's individual accounts for each party, but then you have accounts that are in the middle for joint expenses maybe for shared goals. It can take all different shapes and sizes inside of that. And then the far right, you got the completely combined. That's where all the income, all the expenses, one place. You're getting as few accounts as possible. You can't have everything together with qualified plans, so like 401ks, 403bs at work, Roth IRAs. Those have to be separate, just for tax rules. But everything else will be combined. So since Hone put me on the spot earlier, and you went through this more recently than me, since I'm the old married guy who's been married for 8 years, tell me about where you stand and how you got to that place.
Great question, Brian. So I mentioned that my now husband, and I have been together for 10 years. When we started out, we're doing the 50-50. So we've been pretty separate for the majority of our relationship. We got married last September and have gone through the very painful process. I mean, it really is painful, of merging your accounts and trying to get on the same page with our goals and trying to set up recurring expenses. So we're merging to this kind of middle ground. This feels right now. I still have my individual checking account. My husband has his, but we contribute every month to a joint account. To be honest, I don't know if we'll ever get to the far right. I think we're gonna kind of see how it goes, and this feels good right now. One thing I will say, no matter what situation you have, one thing that's been really valuable for my husband and I, especially as we have individual accounts that we're not ready to merge, we have leverage tools to link everything so that we have visibility on everything. And this is important for a couple of reasons. One, if something ever happened to my husband, I would be very upset, but at least I would have visibility on everything we have, and I would feel in control and like I know what our financial world looks like. So that's one thing, kind of a continuity aspect, but also it's really helping us build trust. So even though I don't go and look at all of his transactions, and he doesn't do the same with mine, just opening up, again, doing the kind of financial reveal on an ongoing basis really has allowed us to build that trust very quickly. So I highly encourage you, no matter what situation you have, to think about having a shared view of that. I'm sure your situation is very different.
Yeah, that's a great point. That honestly, we merged right after college. We got married right after college. So we just did completely combined because, quite frankly, it was easiest. But I mean, I think you hit on a great point. The key is to have transparency no matter which option, deliberately decide. Some of the other things, as you're deciding this, depending on income differences, that can have an impact. The amount of debt you're bringing into a relationship, that can have an impact. And those are all things that kind of end up, deciding which end of the spectrum you live on. So now that we talked about, okay, how do we do the day-to-day management and what roles do we have for setting up accounts? The next most common question we get is, okay, we reduced our budget. We did the hard part. We cut our spending. We got $500 a month or $100 a month. What in the world do we do with that? What should we do with our next dollar? And to be honest with you, this is where I'd say I probably spend most of my time as a financial nerd and leader of our financial planning team, is figuring out how do we put together our next best dollar hierarchy. And it's all going to depend on kind of where you come into the situation and what step you've already had taken care of. So when we look at it, the first thing that people should be considering with that extra dollar that they have is everyone should have a safety net. I mean, you termed it as the oh crap money. Oh crap money, safety net, whatever you want to call it. It's essentially, having 1 month's worth of expenses. So if something happens, your car breaks down, your animal gets sick, whatever that may be, you can go reach into that and you can pay for it without going into credit card debt to begin with, or going further in the credit card debt if you already have credit cards. So that's really the first thing that we target people doing when they're building out their financial plan as a couple. Second thing we look at doing is get that match. Your match is free money. Take advantage of that. Whatever your match is at work, always, always, always take advantage of that match. Third thing we look at doing is protecting your income. You know, if everything works out fine, no one likes to think they're going to get sick or injured. No one likes to think about passing away. But the fact is, you want your plan to be able to move forward no matter what happens. So no matter what, you should be looking at protecting your income with disability insurance. And then if you have dependents that are, relying on you, make sure you have cost-effective life insurance. No matter what, on the insurance side of things, make sure you have the right amount of coverage. Make sure that you're doing it in a cost-effective manner so you don't impact everything else. And then fourth, attack the bad debt. That is really a majority of the conversations we have with people. And I guess what I mean by bad debt would be credit cards, payday loans, personal loans, debt that you're paying high interest on, and debt that you used in the past to accelerate consumption. And it's going after those using the snowball approach. So some of you may be familiar with the snowball approach, some of you may not be. Essentially what we're doing is we are going after the lowest balance first. So whatever the lowest balance is, let's say you have two credit cards. One has $1,000 on it, the other one has $5,000 on it. You are taking every excess payment you can, every excess dollar, you're paying it towards that $1,000 credit card. You get that paid off. You take that payment that you're just making, plus the current minimum payment that you're paying on your $5,000 credit card, and you attack that credit card. Rinse and repeat, depending on how many pieces of bad debt you have, and you're getting rid of that bad debt.
Brian, how high is high for interest rates?
Yeah, I mean, typically we're looking at that 8-9% range, where if you're above that range, that's bad debt, and we want to attack that. So yeah, that's typically where the credit cards, the payday loans, the personal loans, that's where those are going to fall in. Next step is the emergency fund. This is where we're building out our safety net. This is one step beyond that safety net. This is typically 3 to 6 months worth of expenses, and this is building out that cushion. So like my wife wanted to do, it's a big enough cushion where if you lost your job, if something major happened, you can dip into that without having to go into debt, without having to be stressed out, without having to panic. It gives you a sense of security, and it kind of puts that blanket over you so that way you can make decisions from a rational perspective. I said the 3 to 6 month thing. Typically, if you got double income, both you and your spouse are working, 3 months, that's probably what you're going to be targeting. If you have dependents, one of you is working, that's where you get in the 6 month range. And that should be invested in a savings account. Your priority is safety. So use high yield savings. SoFi Money is a great opportunity related to that product for an emergency fund account. After that, we're looking at going after retirement. I don't know about you all, but I do not want to work the rest of my life. I want to be financially independent, so that way I can do whatever I want to do. If that's work, great. If it's not work, awesome. So that's where we target 15% of your income saving towards retirement. That could be your qualified plans at work, traditional IRAs, Roth IRAs, HSAs, taking advantage of those vehicles and saving and tucking that money aside for retirement. Then after that, that's where we get to the other additional goals. Paying for a kid's college, buying a house, buying a vacation property, you name it. This is all the extra stuff. And you'll notice that we have this after saving for retirement. We want people to get that firm foundation in place and get a firm plan on track before they start looking at all of these extra, some might say fun things. So that's going to be setting aside all those different aspects. And then finally, we have paying down good debt. So good debt would be a mortgage, student loans. This is debt that you took out trying to get ahead in life and ultimately increasing your earning, having a place to live, and generally speaking, low interest rates. So we have that paid down after the other 7 steps. Okay, so last but not least, so we're talking about a few of those steps that we focus on with the best use of your next dollar have to do with investing. And this is a question we get all the time. A lot of people are overwhelmed by investing. It's not something that they were educated on throughout their schooling, and they have a lot of questions. We tend to look at it in a pretty simple manner. We break it down into 3 buckets. It's all about when you want to use that money and what you're saving that money for. If it's a short-term need, let's say if you want to buy a house in 3 years, or if you want to pay for a wedding a year from now, you're engaged and you got your wedding planned a year from now, or your emergency fund. The priority there is safety. It's safety and liquidity. That money should not be invested in the stock market. Stock market's going to go up, it's going to go down. It went down today. I have no clue what it's going to do tomorrow, next week, next month. But I can tell you there's going to be lots of ups and downs. It's going to be for those in-between goals, 3 to 5 years, home, purchasing a car, vacation property. That's where you got some flexibility there. You can start to take on a little bit more risk because you can weather the ups and the downs. You're not going to have to worry about selling out of something in 6 months to pay for it. So you could have a mix between stocks and bonds. And then finally, the long-term bucket, 5 years plus. That's going to be retirement, long-term goals. For me, that's paying for my kids' college and retirement. That's going to be invested in the market. You can invest that a little bit more aggressively because you can handle the ups and downs. You have plenty of time to get that higher expected return while dealing with not having to access it for a longer period of time. So that's generally how we approach putting together an investment strategy. No matter what bucket we're in, the key is going to be figuring out what the plan is going to be, paying attention to the fees you're paying attention to the taxes that you're paying, and overall just controlling that over the long term.
This might be actually really helpful too when you're understanding what your individual goals are and what your goals are together, to use this as a map and map out where your goals kind of fall in these buckets, because then maybe you can see, hey, we can consolidate a goal here and kind of invest towards them together in this 3 to 5 year mark. Another thing I'll say, not directly related to investing, but really kind of starting to invest. And I mentioned earlier, kind of my husband and I went about the 50-50 kind of ratio. But now that we're really combining finances, we're trying to understand, based on our cash flow, who should be contributing what and when. And so it's kind of a guessing game, honestly. We looked at our cash flow and we said, okay, we think we can afford this much extra to go towards a house once we've identified that plan and a goal. And so we put aside a sum of money to contribute every month. And it's been a couple months and I don't miss the money. So I'm thinking at our next money date, we'll talk about actually increasing the amount. So it can go up and down. The hardest part is starting. You can always make changes. And great, let's wrap it all up and then we'll get into some Q&A. So we'll also be sending you an email with a PDF of basically a worksheet to work through everything we talked about today, so you all can have these conversations at home. But basically start by having that transparent conversation. Talk about your goals, talk about your values and your current situation. Establish deliberate roles, really explore what your money personality is and how you can work together to achieve your goals. And finally, leverage technology to give yourself a holistic view of your finances and also with your partner. And we're really excited. We're actually working on a product, money management app that we're going to be releasing next year. We can't say too much about it, but we're really excited. You all will be the first to know. We'll send an announcement to our members. But it's basically a way for all of the SoFi products to interact with the product, and we can help you set up your goals and help you keep track of your goals and your spending. Also, I mentioned earlier, we will be sending out a link for everyone here, a complimentary conversation with a financial planner at SoFi. It's really no hassle. You can talk to them. You can explore, hey, I don't even know what my goals are, or this is where we are. You can kind of meet in the middle, use them as a tool to have that conversation with your partner if you'd like to have kind of a mediator. We can use them for that too. Great. So thank you all for listening. We're going to jump to some questions. Again, if you're listening on the live stream, please comment. If we don't get to your question on the live stream, we will address it after. So let's dive right in. And Paige will be coming around with a microphone to ask your question. Awesome.
A quick question about the tools that you guys are using. I know you said that you are transparent about the budgeting you guys do regardless of the separate accounts. Can you share some of the most effective tools that are here today before money management, and perhaps maybe even some budgeting tools to help both people meet that goal?
Sure.
Yeah, I guess I'll take this one, and please,
I have
if I miss anything, chime in.
Opinions on it.
So I guess the first thing when it comes to budgeting, my wife and I were a little bit different. We don't go through the process of line iteming out, 50 different things that we're going to spend our money on. that just wasn't a good use of our time. It didn't fit my money personality. So ultimately what we decided would be best for us is we break our budget down into 50, 30, 20. 50% is going to be for our essential expenses, 30% for our fun money or discretionary expenses, 20% for savings. And we do that 20% savings first, and then essentially whatever's left over, whatever hits our accounts, we spend. So it's kind of a way for us to take the work out of budgeting. So it's kind of like the anti-budgeting budget. And we found that really effective. And we found that to be effective as we're working with members because of the standpoint that, I don't know about everyone else here, I just don't have the time I used Mint. I was a religious user of Mint for a while, but I found myself going in there all the time, and it took like so much time to fix the categories, and I had like 30 different categories because I'm OCD. Nothing against Mint because it's great, but we shifted to the anti-budgeting budget approach by just saving first and then going from there, spending what's left over. So I think that would be my suggestion, and that's what we've seen work extremely well for people rather than going through with a fine-tooth comb, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I echo Brian's experience. As a CFP, it's odd that I too don't like to get in the weeds of the budget. I mean, just the word budget kind of makes me cringe. So we just we try to avoid it. Maybe we have that kind of money avoidance personality too. But really, the approach we take is, I mentioned earlier, we have a goal. We kind of do some backwards math, and we're like, okay, if we need this amount of money in 5 years, let's work backwards and figure out how much we need to start saving. Can we afford that? Can we try to afford that? Let's just try. Let's just test it out, because we can always change it. Again, setting up the direct deposit is the hard part. Switching the number month over month is easy. And so, when life happens, so maybe you get a bonus and you can contribute more to that goal to get there sooner, or maybe you get laid off and you're not able to reach that goal as soon as you thought. As long as you're having that conversation, I think, and really being honest with yourself and checking in with each other, you can find what works for you just by trial and error.
I wanted to ask about taxes, and when you're filing taxes with your married couple, how do you guys work out the taxes? Do you do a joint? What kind of considerations if one partner makes more money? How do you guys talk about it or figure that out?
Yeah, so I guess first and foremost, we are not tax advisors. Legally, I can't provide tax advice, but I will just say there are some considerations. My wife and I, we've been married filing jointly all along. There are some situations where married filing separately makes more sense. Maybe it's due to student loan repayment strategies, let's say an income-based repayment, or for other reasons, but that's definitely something that you should talk to a tax accountant for, to be completely honest with you.
Tax advisors do have softwares that can pretty easily run an analysis to say, okay, what if we filed jointly? What if we filed married filing separate?
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely talk to your advisor. Yes.
Hi. You mentioned leveraging on technology and automation to improve spending behavior. Could you develop a little bit more on this? Because I personally feel like I'm not signing up for any automation when it comes to payment, just because I feel like I'm losing control of whenever payment is done. So tell me how it actually improves spending behavior.
Great, I can speak to this. So I do have some systems set up. So for example, I have a Chase credit card and I auto pay that credit card, but I also have it set up to receive alerts so that when it does auto pay, I get an alert to go look, and I go and look at my statement. So that can be one way to have automation work for you, but you still have visibility, and you can talk to Chase if you see a fraudulent charge, or you talk to your bank. That may be one way that works for you. I would say really in general, if you're not comfortable with automation, setting up as many reminders and notifications if you can. Typically, the tools out there have notifications, pretty robust notifications you can set up, and good old Google Calendar works for me too.
Yeah, and I'd say I kind of take it to the extreme, to be honest with you, because I kind of have to. Thinking about it, I think my utilities are the only bills that aren't automatically taken out of my account. I don't know if we asked about that, but for some reason they aren't. I guess it varies every month. So I think that's the only one that's not automatically taken out. So like car insurance, cell phone, our monthly rent, and before when we owned our house, a mortgage, all that I just have automatically coming out. My savings, I also do the same thing. So I have it automatically going into my brokerage account. Obviously, the 401k at work is automatically contributed. So I think for me, what I did in the beginning was I made a list of all my expenses, and then I basically kind of made a checkbox it doesn't sound very technologically advanced to get to automation. And I just checked which one was automatically coming out, which one wasn't. And then I looked at each one to make sure I could get everyone automatically taken out as much as possible.
How many of you look at your accounts once a week? How many of you look at them every day? Okay. So you find what works for you, but really checking in and, again, making the money date. Maybe it's a money date with yourself to actually just go in and just feel like you understand what's going on with all the money moving in and out. And maybe it's you manually moving it yourself. So it's really up to you, but setting up reminders is probably your best bet.
We have one from the live stream.
Oh, all right, great.
So this member asks, what's your advice for couples who have different investment styles? For example, if one has a higher risk tolerance than the other?
And this is a common question.
That's
that we
a great
get.
question.
Yeah, it's a great question. It comes up on a regular basis because a lot of times people don't agree on everything. I think it's overall getting to the same page and understanding what your risk level is individually, and then figuring out some way to harmonize it to get it together. Because to be honest with you, if I am completely aggressive, my wife is completely conservative, which is kind of like the classic stereotype, which isn't exactly true. Our money is going to be working somewhere in the middle anyway, so we both be moving kind of moderate, and we're going to be saving for our goals. So it really is kind of harmonizing those differences and understanding that your money is going to be growing together, and you're going to be retiring together, taking that money out together. So you should get on the same page deliberately rather than just kind of expecting that you're going to manage everything completely separately. So a lot of it's just having that conversation, hashing it out, and then deciding and understanding what each other is invested in. Oh.
Mike, got it? All right, another question. Are you up here?
By the way, Britney Spears' mic never fell out like that, so she
Happy
definitely
birthday,
has
Britney.
a one-up on me.
She's a queen.
So my question kind of centers around the conversation you had about our money personalities. I think that hit like the core for me, and with my husband and I, and the way I was brought up, the way he was brought up, and just kind of how we think about money. And how many apps are there about what horoscope goes well with each other, and how we're gonna date, and what's our sex life gonna be like, and we're gonna be best friends, and these are the best ways that you can work together. And I mean, is there any layout of like, if you are this personality financially and you are this personality, this is kind of a great strategy to go towards? Because I mean, I feel like if you could map out, if you could each identify maybe where you find yourself, and then there's kind of a fail-safe of this kind of works, we've seen this work well. I mean, is there any studies or things to kind of say, well, do a test of this works for me and this is how I feel individually, and then it does that like, and this is what we think.
Automatically, yes.
Automatically. So no, not that I'm aware of, to be honest with you. This is somewhat
a
newer
great
to look
idea.
at it. Yeah.
App.
Yes, love that idea.
it's
Taking mental notes.
It's a fantastic idea because I think it is something that people should pay attention to and understand. And I think we are investigating it further because I think the psychological aspect of money is something that is more and more and more important because, we kind of talked about it earlier on, that the nuts and bolts of financial planning, it's relatively simple. It's actually the psychological aspect of it, of doing it, is the extremely challenging part. So
Yeah, getting
we're
there is
exploring
hard.
at it. Yeah.
Yeah, great idea. I'm going to talk to you more about that.
You didn't patent that idea yet, did you?
No.
Okay.
I work for SoFi, so.
So yeah, it'd be
One SoFi.
So my question is about family planning. If I would like to have kids in a couple years, own a house, we're in the Bay Area, it's really expensive, we have debt. How do we mix in saving for a family and preparing for that while also still being aggressive towards our debt?
Do you want to hit the Bay Area piece, or do you want me to hit the family piece? I full disclosure, I live in Philadelphia, so. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shouldn't have led with. I shouldn't have led with
So
that.
yeah, so you and I are actually in pretty similar situations. So having gotten married a year ago, we're living in San Francisco. We are saving for a down payment on a house. Who knows where that will be? But at least we're saving towards it, and we have a goal in mind. That's in 3 to 5 years. Haven't set up the kid goal yet, but that's probably coming. Given the timing. But yeah, I think it's really sitting down, and this really speaks to what Brian said earlier about having kind of competing goals. Maybe you have the same goals, but maybe they themselves are competing. So it's really sitting down and understanding what is your top priority, and as long as you're on the same page about that, and you're making sure that you're not completely foregoing everything else and making sure you're keeping the lights on, then you can together be pretty aggressive about saving towards that goal. So I mean that's what I would say. Brian, do you have any color to add?
Yeah, so I have a 16-month-old son, so the whole family planning thing is fresh in my mind. Really, I think it's following that next best dollar framework that we listed out, and it's kind of going through that pecking order. And I think where it changes when you have a family is, quite frankly, the emergency fund piece, because your expenses are going to change. So what my wife and I did, and what we work with members on, is as you're starting to think about having a family, start figuring out what that budget's going to look like and how it's going to impact it. Because I'll tell you from firsthand experiences, some expenses are going to be added, others are going to go away. So you're going to have the cost of childcare, you're going to have the furniture. Please don't go buy all the new toys, because my kid, I buy a $100 toy and he plays with the box for 10 times longer than the toy. But figure out what that budget's going to be for those added expenses. Figure out what's going to go away. You're probably not going to be going out to eat 4 nights a week and going out on the weekends as much. At least we don't. And then you adjust that, and that's what your new emergency fund target becomes, and you start building towards that. So I think it's kind of tackling those first steps and then readjusting your budget based on the upcoming family expenses.
And Brian, one of our first questions was, should you pay off your loans before you have a kid?
Well, you told me there's no right or wrong answers, but I guess just in my opinion, from the SoFi perspective, I don't think that's a prerequisite. Student loans, I mean, if I waited, I still have student loan. I'm working on my PhD right now. I'm a glutton for punishment. Student loans are one of those things you invested in yourself, and it's factored into your budget. And quite frankly, typically they're relatively low interest. So it's like, do you really need to prioritize that before other savings goals? From a mathematical perspective, no. That's why we have it number 8 on our list as opposed to a little bit higher. So I don't think you need to stress about we need to meet X, Y, and Z before we have kids. It's just building that new budget and figuring out how you can accomplish that within that new budget.
Any other questions? Great.
Hi guys, thank you. So I kind of want to piggyback on that last question. We are thinking about buying a home, and quite honestly, after those 8, the order in which things should be paid, that was kind of eye-opening for me, because buying a home was, I think, like number 6. And we have other ones, as I'm sure other people do as well. But it's, as we all know, it's super expensive to live here. But we are still thinking about buying a home here now, but moving and relocating in a couple of years. Does it make sense to do this right now? And I don't know if you could necessarily answer that question because it's super personal, but does it make sense to
say, and I can tell that by the hotel prices, what you'll really want to think of is the fact that you're going to pay costs when you buy and sell a house. So you have to factor that in. I mean, yes, real estate markets, the prices are nuts. Are they always going to go up? I don't know. But when it's something that short term, typically the rule of thumb is, hey, you're looking at that 5 to 8 year range where you want to stay somewhere before you buy versus renting. That's where that break-even point comes into play. I mean, everyone's situation's different depending on rent and things like that, but that's the general rule of thumb. And quite frankly, that's what my wife and I follow, is that 5 to 8 year window.
So a quick question about that middle methodology of the joint account and then having the separate accounts.
Yeah.
How do you figure out the joint piece, right? Like
Yeah.
if you have a higher salary with your significant other or vice versa, how do you determine what those percentages are, or is it 50-50 in your case still in the joint piece?
Great question. It is not still 50-50. Women are going to rule the world.
No arguments for me.
Yeah. So great question. So I can just give you my example. So, individual accounts for almost 10 years. We, in the last year, have opened up a joint checking account, and we each contribute to that every month. We've set up automatic transfers from our individual accounts, and we looked at our cash flow after we've, saved up for an emergency fund. And by the way, this 1, 2, 3, 4, the steps to get through. The emergency fund, the oh crap fund, once you fill them up, you can keep moving. So you're not tackling all six of them at the same time. But really, we took care of our emergency fund, and then we set up our goal. I mentioned we're saving for a down payment on a house. We figured out a number that we wanted to save towards and have in the next 3 to 5 years. I think 5 years more realistically. And so we worked backwards, and we said, okay, we need $500 a month or whatever it is to save jointly towards this goal. I think I can contribute this. Can you contribute the rest? And again, trial and error. We set it up. I mean, we meet, we talk. We're like, hey, how you feeling about this? Like, can you go up? Can you go down? Do you want to spend more aggressively towards this? Is this still our top priority goal? Is there something else we should be saving towards? So we don't do this kind of crazy math or really dive deep. It's like literally, okay, of that $500, I'm going to contribute $300. You try $200. And we'll meet up in 2 months and see how it's going. Any more from the live stream comments? All right. Great. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. We've really appreciated you. Thank you. Thank you. Brian and I will stick around for a little bit afterwards. If you want to come talk to us, we can grab a drink. Otherwise, thanks for joining. We're going to send out an email, talk to a financial advisor, and we'll see you soon.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thanks.